Wrestling games have seen many different forms over the years. In the early days, some of the greatest hits ever were produced, like No Mercy and SmackDown Here Comes the Pain. There was a large amount of wrestling games being released, with all sorts of wacky concepts and gameplay. Why this was because it simply didn't matter. In the time I was growing up, there would be a game for movies and everything else you could think of. When companies made games, even if it failed, eventually you would get something that stuck, because companies threw around money into games for a flourishing game market. In wrestling, we've had some interesting games like WWE Crush Hour, WrestleMania 19, and the weirdest of them all, WWE 2K20. We've had some all-time classics like SmackDown Here Comes the Pain, Shut Your Mouth, and one of my personal favorites, WWE Day of Reckoning. The glory days of wrestling games was during the SmackDown vs. Raw series. In that period between 2004 and 2010, you knew you were gonna get a banger. Matches were fun to play, there were modes upon modes, and you could just entrench yourself into a wrestling game. But it's safe to say in recent years, WWE games haven't lived up to the legacy of the SmackDown vs. Raw series. Fans have grown tired of the same copy-paste model of current games, the lack of game modes, and how quickly it becomes outdated. Everyone is yearning for a new game which we can sink our teeth into once again. Here's the sad reality for people my age who grew up in the 2000s. Let's say 2K were to give us SmackDown vs. Raw again. It just wouldn't hit the same. Why? Because the fact of the matter is, we're not kids anymore. We have other responsibilities. So other than the name and the old game modes, I don't know if that series would be the hit that we all assume that it's going to be. The fact of the matter is, when you're a kid, you have endless hours to play games. That endless time creates an attachment with certain games. You remember those games much better. Let's say SmackDown vs. Raw 07 were to come out in today's day and age, sure, we'd enjoy it, but the connection just wouldn't be the same. That's why nostalgia sells, because it brings us to a better time. In current day, the focus on the simulation aspect of games has removed the button mashing and made it less easy to play for casuals. In turn, all-time favorite game modes have also gone away and have been replaced by modes some prefer and others don't. Consumers who grew up playing wrestling games are mostly those same people who grew up playing SmackDown vs. Raw. But why do we dislike the new game so much? It's a combination of developers caring too much about looking legit. Them trying to look legit is good in some aspects, but most of us just want to position a ladder anywhere we want to brawl in Times Square, we want to button mash, and overall, we just want a mixture of simulation and arcade. In recent years, 2K has come under fire for some recent game releases. When 2K20 came out, it was a bug-filled disaster. The ref was feeling a bit frisky for Charlotte, Becky Lynch made the transition to googly eyes, and The Rock looked possessed. While 2K has released some solid titles like 2K19 and 2K16, I want to talk about the last great wrestling game. That was WWE 2K14. WWE 2K14 came out in October of 2013. This game was still produced by Yuke's, but 2K took over the naming rights. So instead of being called WWE 14, it was moved into 2K's ecosystem of games, and we got the first installment in the WWE 2K series. A year prior, we had gotten WWE 13. This game was so much fun. I enjoyed everything about that game. Even though it didn't have a road to WrestleMania, it was still so much fun. So when the trailer dropped for the following year's installment, the question became, how's this gonna outdo WWE 13? I popped this thing in, and on the cover and the loading screen was The Rock. What better a way for Yuke's and THQ to take a final bow in the wrestling game world than have a truly iconic star on an iconic game. One of the things that made this game so amazing was the roster. It was the perfect blend of current day stars and stars of days past. John Cena, The Rock, Eddie Guerrero, Brock Lesnar, Undertaker, Andre, Bret Hart, all at your fingertips, which would lead to unlimited possibilities. It had all the boxes checked. If you hadn't played a WWE game in a while or fell out with wrestling, there was someone from your era there. The roster spoiled us. This was in the days before we had these nuts rosters like we do every year now. The roster was unbeatable. Speaking of unbeatable, there was Beat the Streak, a mode specifically dedicated to The Undertaker's legendary WrestleMania streak. Here you could rewrite history or create your own. But honestly, you couldn't. The Undertaker would turn into a combination of Triple H, The Rock, John Cena, and himself. This thing was so OP, you'd be pulling your hair out trying to beat the streak. But that's what made it so fun. A genuine challenge is what gamers yearn for. This is what separates the good games from the great games. The amazing part about this mode was the attention to detail. Just when you had The Undertaker at his wits, ready to cap things off, boom, lights go out. It's that sort of attention to minor detail which is missing in these games today. They gave him multiple different animations in which the match could change. It was so frustrating, but it was just so much fun. It's kind of weird that we got 2K14, and in 2014 is where the streak actually ended in real life. It was the perfect timing to release that mode, a tribute to one of the greatest performers and characters of all time. It's like nothing could beat him. Actually, you know what? I know what could beat The Undertaker at WrestleMania. Copyright claiming all of his videos. That works. You had Undertaker on his home turf of WrestleMania. The same WrestleMania which had a whole mode dedicated to it. 30 years of WrestleMania. Showcase mode made its debut in WWE 13 and it featured arguably the greatest era in wrestling history, the Attitude Era. The sheer effort that was put into that mode was amazing. So how would the game make it even better? Well, they done the most storied era in wrestling. Why not do the most storied event? The biggest spectacle in sports about to reach its 30th anniversary in the upcoming year, so they went balls to the wall with this mode. This mode was flat out amazing. You could relive classic matches from the history of WrestleMania. You played matches from WrestleMania 1 to WrestleMania 29. There were some iconic moments and matches to relive, and it would help you unlock wrestlers, which only gave the game more layers. And then my favorite part, the arenas. The mode gave you every single arena in WrestleMania history, and they all looked stunning. They crafted this game with history, playability, and eyes on wrestling's lineage in mind. It's crazy how they don't include all these arenas in the newer games, but what sucks about the newer games is that Showcase mode starts to feature things we've just come off of. For example, you have the Women's Evolution or Daniel Bryan's run in WWE. These things are all pretty recent. Ask me in 10 years time, then yeah, I'll want to relive these moments, but so soon after it's happened, that's a no for me. The thing is, you're only limited to a few characters you can play with. Whereas in 30 years of WrestleMania mode, you had stars from the Attitude Era, the New Generation Era, and my favorite, the Ruthless Aggression Era. It was just great. If that wasn't enough for you, you had Universe mode. With that roster, you could keep yourself busy for hours on end, creating whatever you want. Whatever rivalries you want, it was just another in a long line of things to keep you busy, and they weren't just making it for the sake of adding another game mode, they were genuinely crafted with the gamer in mind. That's what made this game so much fun, was you just had so much to do. You got tired of one thing, you could hop into another. You got tired of what was presented to you, well, show us what you got. You can create something yourself, and that's where the amazing customization and creation suite came in. Create a Story made its final appearance in WWE games, and the things you can do with this mode were limited to your imagination. You could create as many stories as you wanted. You could do so much with this mode, and the stacked roster only helped. But the cool part was you could download other stories too. Some people legit crafted the most wacky and entertaining stories I have ever seen in my life. There was just some wild things going on in this mode, and how 2K didn't carry it over into present games boggles my mind. The gameplay was so smooth, it looked amazing, whether you were putting people through tables or you just wanted to sit back and watch the entrances. Your eyes were catered to, and so was your gaming pleasure. We had Inferno matches, special guest referee matches, and overall, this game just topped off this generation of consoles perfectly. Other games had moved over to next gen, but WWE games were back a year, and it gave us one of the most complete, fun, and enjoyable games in wrestling history. It was the culmination of Yuke's and THQ's hard work, and what an amazing way to go out. Earlier I mentioned how WWE games today are too focused on simulation. They care too much about grapples and holds and all this, but wrestling games should have a little bit of that, but not just be completely simulation based. You still need that arcade element. This game had the perfect mix of arcade and simulation. The matches were fun to play, but at the same time, they looked realistic as well. WWE 2K14 was truly the last great wrestling game. Well, 2K19 was the best wrestling game that 2K has fully had their hands on. It just doesn't compare to 2K14. Even 7 years later, if you were to pick up this game, you'd enjoy it. The consensus in the wrestling game community is what we once had, we want again. This is one of the reasons people have soured on 2K's ability to deliver WWE games. It's because they haven't proved they can deliver. Looking around, there are so many people who are still saying that they don't expect much from WWE 2K22. And I mean, they gave you a patchwork on the same game for a few straight years and stripped away everything that made the game so amazing, so why would you? It's been nearly 2 years since we got a wrestling game. What do fans want? It's simple: game modes, customization, and a well-functioning game. The groundwork has been laid out for 2K to take. Just look at all the old hits. Looking back at this game, it's really weird how they started to rebuild wrestling games from the ground up, starting with 2K15. Their vision for the game went a completely different direction as they had a winning formula with 2K14. Like, you're really telling me that WWE 2K14 with a modernized roster, an enhanced career mode, the same gameplay plus the additions of game modes like GM mode and additional match types wouldn't go down as one of the greatest wrestling games ever? This game tied a bow perfectly on an amazing time for wrestling games. With 2K22 coming out sometime soon, I figured I'd take y'all on a trip down memory lane. So yeah, there it is. I made a video. I figured on my birthday I had to make a video, so I hope you guys all enjoyed. I'm still working on getting my old videos back. Hopefully we can have them back on the channel so you guys can enjoy them. I also wanted to say a huge thank you to everyone who supported me when that nuke job happened. It truly meant a lot when you guys came together to support the channel. Here's some shoutouts to people who have been tremendous during this time. If you don't get mentioned here, you will be mentioned in the future videos. I'm sorry. As always, God bless you all. Appreciate you guys, and I'll see you guys in the next video.